Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Reyes. I'm your instructor for human physiology. I'm hoping you can see my image up in the corner of this recording. This is our opening recording for the semester, and I wanted to make sure that you got a chance to see me, at least through our lectures here first, before we went into the labs. In the labs, you'll get a chance to see me in person, and we'll be spending a lot of time talking and doing lots of hands-on stuff that we will be playing with in the labs themselves. I'm hoping you take that opportunity to call me over so that we can talk about things regarding the class, regarding your education, regarding your career, kind of moving on. I want to get to know you. I'm hoping I can help you in getting to those career goals that you actually have and to understand what we're actually doing here in physiology. So I'm hoping all of you, while you were registering for this class, we're trying to understand, okay, well, what is human physiology? And many of you probably have already a concept of what human physiology is. Well, before we get into an actual definition, I want to make sure that you realize that at other four-year institutions in past generations, physiology was the last course you took. The last course you took. And why is that? Well, because to understand the physiology itself, you had to understand many of the concepts from the other components of science. So you had to understand some physics, you had to understand chemistry, you had to understand some engineering and genetics and all these other components of science, and try to bring those together so that you can understand how this system is working together. And so you'll see our definition of physiology is the science that is concerned with the function of the living organism, okay? And all the parts that make up that living organism, okay? So we're going to be looking at multiple components of our body, how they work together and form this system, this body, and how it works in trying to interact with our environment. To do so, as I have here in the definition, we're going to be pulling together multiple processes, physical, chemical. You're going to see. You're going to get a chance to learn some physics. You're going to get a chance to use the chemistry that you were already exposed to as one of the prerequisites for this class. And for, again, this course here at City College and for all the places that you're hoping to use this information, my job is to make sure that you understand the basic concepts behind this. It's one of the reasons why, even though I told you that you probably should understand some physics and genetics and all that, that it's not a prerequisite. I'm going to try to give you some of those bits of information here, all right? As you move on in your careers, depending on which programs you're moving to, they'll ask you to kind of bone up on some of those other areas, most likely. So let's get started. Let's kind of play with this a little bit, all right? So again, human physiology. And physiology actually comes from the Greeks themselves. And it's literally the term is to study nature, to understand how this system works. All right. So keep that in mind. You're going to be seeing multiple things. All right. Well, in dealing with the physiology of the body, I'm hoping most of you realize we're going to have to build it from the ground up for you to understand this. And I'm hoping that you see the relationship from the structures that we're going to be talking about. We're going to start by talking about cells. We're going to talking not just about their anatomical structure. We're going to pull those anatomical structures together so that you can understand how a cell is working. Now, I'm not going to be able to give you every aspect. We're not going to talk about every organelle. We're going to talk about overall basic concepts because you should have a general understanding of the cell already. So as we talk about cells, we're going to, a lot of it should be review, but we're going to have to take some of those concepts and expand them so that we can take these cells, these structural structures that we have in our body, and start to build things like tissues. Now, those tissues, you've heard of the terms already, and you've been exposed probably to some of them. Muscle tissues, all the different types of muscle tissues, smooth muscle, skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, all of that. we're going to be investigating some of those tissues again and getting you to understand some of the basic principles associated with them. Epithelial cells and central nervous system tissue and others. We're going to take, just like we took those cells to build tissues, we're going to take tissues now and start to build organs within our body. Now, I'm hoping already you're starting to see that, well, when you looked at cells before, or were being taught about cells before in your previous classes, that what were the structures that were inside of the cell that helped it to work? They were called organelles. I'm hoping you remember that and you bring that here, all right? Because now we're talking about this larger structure. We're talking about your body. And now we're talking about organs that are helping it to survive or deal with its environment. So already I'm hoping you see that if we understand cells and how they function, by default, we're going to start to understand how not just tissues work, but the organs within our body work, and overall, how those organs work together to form systems, and how these systems are going to be brought together to have our bodies work in the way they do. So if we understand cells, we're probably going to understand how we work. All right? The principles that we talk about with cells, you're going to see are going to be replicated in every level here that we talk about. So at the beginning of the semester, I always tell my students, it's pretty difficult because many of you are learning new concepts, new principles. I promise you, if you hang and learn those principles at the beginning, and I mean the principles associated with things, as we move to tissues or organs and the systems of the body, you're going to see that stuff replicated, and it's going to be easy. Or it's going to be, I'll say this, it'll be easier. It'll be easier. All right? So hang with me, folks. Hang with me. Now, I just mentioned to all of you that if we understand the cell, and we understand how the principles of the wall of a cell works, how the organelles may be working inside of the cell, that the principles associated with all of that are going to be replicated as we move up levels, And so us understanding those levels, and seeing that, well, if we cause one of those components of the cell to change, to alter what it does, all the other parts of the cell are going to have to change as well, because they're all dependent on each other. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to all of you? Well, in that same realm, if our bodies replicate what a cell is like, then that means in our bodies, if tissues, if organ systems change their function or are altered in a particular way, that means every other part of the body has to change as well. Why? Because they're all working as one unit. Nobody works in isolation. Is that clear, folks? Is that clear? That is going to be a major principle for us here in this class. And all of that is encompassed in this term. This is the term, or this term, and this is the way you pronounce it, syncytium. Syncytium. Say it to yourself. Say it to the folks that may be sitting behind you as you're listening to this lecture. Say it to your family at dinner. Say it to others. All right? Syncytium. Syncytium is an old term developed many years ago when scientists during that age were looking at how the heart worked. And you'll see this when we start talking about cardiac tissue and the heart and the cardiovascular network. The heart is just this amazing organ, and that all of the cells literally are tied to each other, connected to each other. One part of it doesn't work properly or decides to change, and we'll talk about what can cause it to change. The rest of the heart has to change as well. The rest of it has to change in its function. So the heart was thought to work as a syncytium, many parts working as one giant cell, even though it's a heart made up of billions of cells, literally working as one. Syncytium is not just a term that we're going to be tying to the heart. The whole body works that way. Any physiological system works that way. Many parts working as one. So the one can survive in the environment. Is that clear, folks? This is going to be a big part of your vocabulary for this semester. Okay? Well, in this, to have this syncytium work, we have to have not just cells working with each other. There's rules. There's levels of organization. There's regulation that's kind of associated with it. And so you'll see over the semester, we're going to be talking about, okay, cells. What are controlling some of the functions associated with the cells? Okay, well, of course, you guys have heard of genes and structures like that. Operons, repressor proteins are going to be huge for us. Transcription factors, membrane transport. All of these are going to be key terms that we utilize and concepts that we utilize to try to understand how cells work. And that will translate to the next level, tissues. All right. Now, those tissues are going to be using all of the same kind of regulating mechanisms, transcription factors, membrane transport for those cells that make up those tissues. But now we have to talk about large areas talking to other large areas. So now we have to incorporate other types of communication, autocoids, paracrine secretion, and in some cases, even though I have it for organ systems over here, some endocrine or neurotransmitter mechanisms. So for both tissues and organ systems, we have tissues that are going to be talking with each other on multiple levels. So everybody is talking to each other. Everybody is talking to each other. How are we doing, folks? Okay. We're going to end our first little lecture, mini lecture, right there. From here, we're going to take it over to the next level and start talking about compartments of the body. So I'll see you here in a little bit, hopefully, looking at your next lecture. Bye-bye.